What is the most messed up thing you've seen a friend do? Story 1. He had me help model for one of his photo shoots that was set on top of a very tall building. When he asked me to move to the edge, he kept talking about how cool it would be to capture someone's death from a building in real time. At this point, I was getting somewhat nervous. Then he gave me a little shove. I backed away and then almost slipped. His response: "See, that could have been so cool. You have mental health issues anyways. Why don't you just do it and you'll be posthumously famous, which will give your life meaning." Now keep in mind, this is paraphrased since it's been a long time ago, but that was the gist of it, and I've never forgotten how it made me feel. After that, I started to gradually cut this person from my life out of fear that he would try to hurt me for the sake of his art. Screw that guy. Story 2. I went on holiday for a week and asked my best friend to pop in and feed my cat. He lived a few doors away. When I got back, my cat was laying by the back door of my house, went inside and his bowl was empty. I called him and asked when, the last time he fed him. He said, "Oh yeah, I forgot." My cat had been outside for a week with no food or water. I haven't spoken to him in 12 years. Story 3. One that comes to mind at the moment. For backstory, I am a trained mandated reporter. My former friend's wife is a trained mandated reporter and holds a professional license in a medical field. They had one toddler and one on the way when this all came to light. We'd been friends for several years, get together randomly, drink, dinner, pool, darts, etc. He invited me over one night to their newly built home to shoot darts in his basement. No big deal. We'd usually have music in the background. He'd not yet installed a stereo, so we figured we'd just use Pandora. But that night he didn't have a smartphone, claimed it got ruined at work. Trades. Thought no big deal, and used mine. Through the years we'd talked about many things. One was how different his sex drive was from his wife's. Didn't seem odd. Just two people not perfectly compatible. About a week later, he asked me to meet him at a restaurant. No biggie, not very uncommon for us. Turned it out to be that he wanted to be in a public place when he informed me that the night before I'd recently been to his house, that several three-letter agencies and the local police and sheriff raided his home and confiscated all his electronics. He'd fallen for a sting operation. He hoped being in public would keep me from harming him. He was right, because I value my volunteer position and my family more than it'd be worth. Turned out he was charged with the largest collection of underage images and videos in that state. He'd also paid to have services done in another country, no, I don't know what. He assured me his kids were not victims. I hope that's correct. Neither his wife or I had any inclination of this. And it's scary how well and how long he hid it. The sheer number of people that I have personal knowledge of that have been arrested and convicted of acts or images of underage kids. It's truly terrifying how many there are. Story 4. A girl was falling down drunk. Totally out of it. No drink spiked. She had been doing a crazy amount of shots without knowing they were double shots. This one friend of mine insisted on taking her home by himself. Me and 3 of other people in the group insisted more strongly to come along and help her home. The whole way back, he kept trying to assure us that he had things under control and didn't need our help. And it became clearer and clearer he was planning on doing. We aggressively told him to knock it off and got her home. First, he tried to insist he should stay with her to make sure she's okay, which we vetoed. Then we caught him trying to get her keys out of her purse so he could come back inside. When that happened, we'd had enough and things got rough. We didn't beat him up, but we very forcefully got him out of her student residence building. She was in bad shape, so we found a friend of hers from down the hall who agreed to come over and look after her. We were worried she might throw up in her sleep or something. Later on that night, he got caught pounding on her dorm room door by the same friend after he managed to sneak back into the building by following someone else when they came in. The whole friend group split up over staying friends with him, but screw that guy. She was literally passed out on her feet and totally incoherent. Story 5. Catfished their friend for their nudes. I'll call him Mitch, and the friend he was getting nudes from was Johnny. Mitch didn't even have a crush or interest in Johnny, but he wanted to see if he could get nudes out of him, and he did. Mitch and Johnny were in a friend group trio and are both gay. Mitch went on Grindr as Johnny's type and messaged him for about a month till he got the pictures. When he told me HE was so giddy and impressed with himself, I was so grossed out. I told Johnny as soon as I could, and safe to say they aren't friends anymore. Story 6. A guy I worked with was about to take his wife on a trip back to their mutual hometown in another state. They had a pair of delightful kittens, and they asked me if I would watch them while they were gone. I had little experience with cats, but these two were just wonderfully playful. I gave him a call when he got back to arrange returning the kittens, but he said they had picked up a non-cat-friendly dog on the journey, and he would just drop off the kittens in the woods. Needless to say, I kept them, and they were wonderful furry friends for me and eventually to my wife and kids. I still think what would have happened to them if I had not been in the right place at the right time. Story 7. Heard a friend at uni. One day he called his girlfriend 3 times. First call, 5 minutes of the most screwed up verbal aggression I even heard of. Second call, loving boyfriend, perfect son-in-law. Third call, worse than the first one. I told him to never speak to me again, and he was the worst human being I ever met. No one has been that honest with him before, and he really wanted to become a close friend to me after that. No chance in hell. Story 8. Had a friend roommate do that to my cats. I was going to see my family for a week, so I asked her to please feed my cats and scoop their litter box while I'm gone. She had 2 cats of her own, so I wasn't asking her to do anything she wasn't already doing, and I had done the same for her in the past. Came back after a week, and not only were their food bowls empty, their water bowl was bone dry, and both their beds were filled with crap. Because she never scooped the litter, and they will stop using the box if it's too dirty. I was freaking livid, but since I was living in the house she owned and paying her rent, I didn't feel like I had any recourse but to just keep my mouth shut and move out as fast possible. Screw you, Kaya. Story 9. My ex, I was 18, had a friend stay over after we all got high and watched a movie. She, my girlfriend, insisted that I sleep on the couch so that they could share the bed. Sure, no problem. I'm going to keep smoking anyway. I don't know how much later it was, but I heard a weird noise and I couldn't tell if it was the TV or not. I muted the TV and waited, and then I heard a muffled moan. I'm thinking, nah, not possible. But then I heard another, much clearer moan. I got up, went to the bedroom, opened the door, and there was my girlfriend, naked, with her thighs wrapped around her friend's head. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, trying to process what I'm seeing, when her friend, without even lifting her head, tells me to shut the door. I closed the door and bailed from the apartment. As I was backing out of the driveway, the ex came running out, still naked, yelling that her friend agreed to a threesome. I left anyway. I went to a friend's house, told the story. They called me a coward and told me to go back there and bang them both. But it just didn't feel right. Like I didn't catch her getting railed by some dude. But she was definitely cheating on me. Story 10. A good friend of mine had declared herself child-free when we were in our mid-20s, but gradually became very aggressively child-free and very dogmatic about it. She was openly spiteful towards kids and parents and took some joy in being confrontational with them in public. She had struggled with mental health for years, and when she was in an upswing and on meds, she would lighten up about it. Still didn't like kids, but wasn't so vocally against them. When I announced my wife was pregnant, she tried for a few months to deal with it. One day, she sent me a message where she was telling me that she was really worried that I wouldn't be able to provide enough for the kid. I lost a job in Ivorate and struggled for a couple years, but by this time, I owned a business and was making around 200K a year, reiterated that it was going to kill my freedom and make me miserable, etc., and that we should consider abortion. It was hurtful to read, but I knew some of it was likely her illness flaring up. I sent her back the most diplomatic message I could, and she held her tongue for some time after. Never had anything to say one way or the other about our daughter. That kept us at arm's length as friends. I posted a picture of me holding our daughter, then about a year old, on the beach. She had a huge smile and was laughing and happy. She sent me a scathing email saying awful stuff about me. I'm a narcissist, I'm evil, I hurt everyone around me, my wife is a slut, and only with me for a green card. Our daughter was going to grow up to be one of those self-loathing happas and hate us. And we deserved it. There was other personal stuff in there as well, stuff about how our daughter was going to be a failure, would be ugly, would get the worst of my and my wife's personality traits, and be widely hated by her peers. She also messaged my parents and one of my sisters to tell them we were the crappiest family she'd ever met, divulged critical things I'd said to her in confidence, etc. Thankfully, my parents don't know how to read message requests on Facebook, so they've sat unread for the last 6 years. But my sister got told she was a neurotic skank and no one would ever love her. Not long after a really bad breakup where she lost pretty much everything, having someone who you've been extremely close with for years do a complete about-face and start actively trying to destroy any happiness you have and ruin your family, and use everything they know about you intimately to do so, for basically no reason, is awful. I hope she's gotten the help she needs in the meantime, but I don't think I'll ever reopen the door for communication. Story 11. So, I had this roommate in college. He wasn't the most popular among my friends, but he honestly wasn't a bad guy at all. Maybe a little smug, but honestly that's not at all unusual for people that age. I certainly wasn't any better, and he grew out of it later. But he just kept getting pink eye. And neither he nor I knew why. So anyway, we were hanging out in the dorm room with two of our friends from high school, when he, my roommate, stepped out to go to class. As soon as he was out the door, friend one jumped up, dropped his pants and underwear, and crop dusted my roommate's pillow. Apparently, he'd been sneaking in and doing this regularly for weeks, but this time decided to let me and friend two in on the secret, and, additionally, just crapped all over the pillow. Visible specks are all over it, and the bed. Friend two and I did not think it was nearly as entertaining as friend one did, and immediately informed my roommate. Apparently friend one had also been peeing in people's soda bottles. We dropped him from the group pretty thoroughly after all that. Story 12. A girl I was close with for quite a while. We'd slept together a few times. She invited me to a house party, insisted that she wanted it to be the night that we would make our involvement public. About an hour into the party, she goes off into another room with a different guy. Spends the whole night there. Clearly her friends have been briefed about her intention to hook up with me because they proceeded to lecture me on how sleeping with a drunk girl would be taking advantage and that I shouldn't put my desire to lose my virginity ahead of common decency. She was the first girl I slept with. As people weren't aware of that, they therefore thought I was a virgin. I spilled the beans that it actually wasn't the first time and that she's been involved with me previously, but that didn't change the fact that she was off with some other guy that night. So instead of my original plan of spending the next day with her, I canceled my leave and went into work. Not the best idea considering I had hardly slept out of sheer frustration after work. I received a call. It turned out that my actions had sparked a huge argument, and the girl was mad at me for telling her friends and ruining our little secret. Should have taken that as enough of a warning sign to end things entirely, but I was stupid and stayed around her for years after that. Story 13. Had a friend who had a 9mm handgun who liked to put a replica bullet into it and pretend he was going to shoot people at his house. He'd even go as far as squeezing the trigger to really scare the hell out of people. One night he was drunk as hell and decided to pull this trick on a friend of his roommates, who'd never been to the house before. Well, that night the idiot accidentally put a live round into the chamber and fired. The bullet missed this girl's head by inches. He begged us not to call the police. Yeah, we called the police. Story 14. My dad is a truck driver, and one day while working he saw someone throw something out of a car and was suspicious. It was a bag of kittens. He managed to rescue them, and we ended up taking care of them until they were old enough to adopt out. More recently, a neighbor of ours passed away and the children just let her cat out into the neighborhood when they were emptying the house out. He was completely domesticated and had no ability to fend for himself. We ended up bringing him to the vet and taking care of him until a friend of mine with a small child adopted him. They became best friends. I will never understand people who treat animals like objects. It is one of the clearest and biggest red flags someone can display. It horrifies me how many people have animal abuse stories in this post. Story 15. Years ago, I watched a friend sell some kid crushed up sleeping pills in place for coke. He had me drive him to town to meet this kid and sell him the stuff. Needless to say, this kid's sister called screaming and crying. She was begging my friend to tell her what he gave her little brother. My friend laughed about it and was completely cold and showed zero empathy through the whole situation. Later found out the kid was perfectly fine. The sister was upset because he did a line in front of her and almost immediately passed out at the table. She said he was asleep for a good 12 hours after one line. That one line was probably equivalent to 3 to 4 sleeping pills straight to the head. My friend did this to buy some harder stuff, which I had no idea he was doing. I lost a friend that night. I was better off for it with that, and what I later learned about him. Story 16. My best friend had just broken up with my brother, who had moved over 1,000 miles and changed jobs to be with her, citing personal differences. My brother was devastated, but I tried to respect her decision and be a source of support for both of them, especially because they truly weren't the best fit. But then she shared with me, because she knew that I loved her and would be happy for her so long as she was happy, that she'd been cheating on my brother for the past month and had found her soulmate. The depth of my brother's heartbreak, already immense, was further compounded by the infidelity. To my bewilderment, she truly couldn't understand why I was ending the friendship, seemed so distraught that I would end a years-long relationship over something so small, and I still can't comprehend why she thought telling me would result in anything other than a complete door slam. Hannah, you still suck, and I'm still angry. Story 17. Was a total accident, but it was crazy. Was working at a log home company with a friend. He was on a tall stepladder guiding a log being held by the crane to be placed on top of the house. The log was set down and he took the tongs off and tossed them over the side like usual. And the crane operator started to lift them. One of the tongs caught the bottom of the log and made it start rolling right towards my friend. I looked up just in time to see him jumping off the stepladder and the log rolling off the top and crushing the stepladder while he was still in the air. It was like a movie scene. The log hit the ground on one end and a wave went through it and split it in half down the length like a toothpick. My friend was okay but shaken up for sure. He nearly had 4,000-pound log fall on him. He escaped by inches. I had no idea a piece of wood could flex and break like that before that day. Was probably the craziest display of physics I've ever seen. Story 18. In college, I set my female best friend up with my male best friend. They really hit it off, and she would make the 2-hour drive from her school to visit mine to visit him every other weekend. They slept together probably around 20 times. This will be relevant, I promise. Well, one day we were on the phone, and she was telling me some spicy details about her last encounter with him, and how much it feels better without a rubber. My male friend is an extremely anxious person, so I asked her how he was okay with not using protection since she had herpes. She said, "Oh, I guess I forgot to tell him." I stopped in my tracks and asked how she forgot to mention that detail in any of their hookups. And I demanded she call him immediately to come clean and tell him to get tested. Her response, but that's embarrassing. Somehow my other friend didn't contract herpes, but that ended my 18-year-long friendship with her immediately. Story 19. Was out for the night with 2 of my friends, and we were all crashing at one of their parents' houses that night. Get drunk, head home, and decide to grab some snacks from the kitchen before hitting the sack. Out of nowhere, my friend gets a watermelon out of the fridge and dares my other friend to bang it. We're teenage lads at this point, so we all find this hilarious, especially when my friend actually does put his dong in the thing. But that's not the screwed up bit. My friend whose house it was then takes the banged watermelon, screams "yeah," and starts to eat where it had been banged. He then threw it full force into the wall and went to bed. Needless to say, me and the watermelon banger went to bed that night, feeling a bit weird about the dong melon munching friend. Never stayed there again. Story 20. Had a female friend who set me up with a friend of hers. We texted for a month or so with said friend, only to find out it was my friend or who I thought was my friend, catfishing me. Why she did this was beyond me. I didn't think it was funny, obviously, but it screwed with my head a great deal. And when me and my other friends called her out on it with more than enough evidence to prove she did it, she still denied it. I couldn't talk or wanted to talk to women for about a year or so. I was so pretty screwed IP from it. Story 21. We had this event at our college, and my friend made a script for it. He was doing stand-up comedy. He goes to the stage and then proceeds to make fun of the way I look, the way I walk, and the way I talk. Everyone was looking at me. I've never felt so embarrassed in my life. I told him multiple times that I wasn't comfortable with him talking about me, but he didn't want to listen to me. I was just recently getting confident about the way I look, and now I'm terrified of going to university because I don't want to be bullied or made fun of. It isn't much compared to the other stories here, though. Thank you all for helping me out. I'm already getting some of my confidence back. I know it's not much, but I changed my profile picture to a photo of myself. I don't know why, but I think it has something to do with me being a bit more confident. Also, I'm really touched by how a lot of you reached out to me and helped me with what I went through. I'm really grateful for all the support and kind messages and comments that I've received. Thank you. I will try to make you all proud. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you all. Story 22. Back in high school, leaving a kegger party with a friend. There was a cat crossing the street and he sped up and ran it over. I lost it and insisted he pull over so I could check on the cat. It managed to get itself to side of road, but died shortly thereafter. Told my friend to go on. I would walk home. That was the end of our friendship. Story 23. 3 years ago, I made the decision to stop drinking. After about 11 months of sobriety, my best friend shows up at my door. Several bottles of vodka with her. "I'm tired of you being sober. Stop being a little baby and get drunk with me today." After a moment of shock, I uttered, "No, that's not happening, and we're never speaking again." Door closes. She tried to reconnect several times, immediately following, "I'm sorry, I was only kidding, and I'll kill myself if you really don't talk to me ever again." To which I replied, "I will not feel guilty for any choices you choose to make in your life." Stopped her manipulation pretty good. Eventually, a relative of hers calls me asking what happened as the friend stated that I cut them out for no reason. As soon as I told the relative, "Well, I got sober and they didn't like that and wanted me to drink with them again," the relative interjected, "Say no more. I respect you for what you did. She really needs to get some help. Thanks for taking my call and explaining. In retrospect, I waited way too long to cut that friend out. Story 24. A friend of a friend, and this is the reason I stopped associating with both of them. The friend of my friend had just purchased new Egyptian cotton sheets, and his wife's cat had apparently got sick and threw up and crap on them. He grabbed the cat, slammed it into the wall, grabbed a lighter, and started to burn the cat's face off. It took me a little bit to process what the hell was happening and to try and stop it, but it was too late. The damage was done. Lost an eye and whiskers on its left side. When I could get him to finally let go of the cat, I took it to the emergency vet. Told the vet the story of what happened. The cat was already on file for other incidents of injury, sadly. And they notified the wife. I don't really know what else came out of that as I left. I recommended she think about divorce and blocked both of them on all methods of communication. It sucked, because the dude who burnt the cat was in a really good band that we would see live quite frequently. So that kind of stopped some of my social outings for a bit. But I wasn't willing to be around psychopaths like that. Story 25. In high school, while hanging out at my house, my at-the-time friend was teaching me how to make napalm out of materials from my dad's garage. Suddenly, a bullfrog started bouncing across my driveway. He caught it and nailed its legs to a tree in my backyard. He then took the napalm and lit the poor frog on fire. The noises the poor animal made the whole time was heartbreaking. I tried to get him to stop even trying to take the frog out of his hands, but he wouldn't listen or let me. He wasn't allowed at my house after that. I didn't tell my parents because I knew my animal-loving mom and dad would have kicked his stupid ass up and down the street in front of the whole neighborhood. I hope you enjoy this video. See you next time. Bye.